quote Einstein. He said, "When I see all the glories of the cosmos, I can't help but believe that there is a divine hand behind it all." So I didn't just come here accidentally. I feel guided. My life, how things have gone, I feel that for all of you, I'm sure that that's the same. You didn't just come here by chance, right? I got nothing else to do. There's something guiding you, something you really feel that is important to come to. So our life, there's a great design behind us. But also there's people that are bad, right? There's people that just have a bad attitude, right? And so a lot of people say there's nothing divine, there's nothing guiding me. Hey, I'm just gonna eat, sleep, and be happy, right? And I don't care about anybody else. So this kind of belief system, atheism, is rooted in a mistaken view of God. God is not an oppressive dictator wanting to control us. God does not judge and condemn us. God is not sitting on some high throne unaffected by human affairs. Can anybody, see air? No, right? But it exists, right? So you don't see God, but it exists. He exists. And it exists. So the root of our culture wars is a rebellion against God. So God exists in the family. This is my family. My daughter was recently married. This is the last time I wore the suit. So the purpose of life, the fundamental is that God is our heavenly parent. And we are to reflect. We are the reflection of God. And that is experience. The school of love is in the family. And this is the fundamental purpose of life. This is what has built and inspired any kind of good society, nation, and world. So there's just so many words. I'm just giving you like a tip of the iceberg, truly, about our commander-in-chief, the father of our nation. And let your hearts feel the afflictions and distress of everyone. Wow. Isn't that beautiful? This is God's will, that we are here to really be open to the spirit of really being able to reclaim our nation, right? So we are the grassroots here. So George Washington, he was an Anglican, but he was a special kind of Anglican. Remember, that's the Church of England, right? Get away. But he was a latitudinarian. Latitudinarian. That's the word you go in the spelling bee and say, what do you spell latitudinarian? Right? What is that? Well, think of the word latitude. He had latitude. He had a Christian belief system, but he also had latitude. And this is the key to America, that it's not just one-minded. He had an ecumenical mind. He had a heart that would, anyone that has this giving and selfless attitude, the spiritual side, then work with that. I have a friend in North Carolina. He said there's a Sikh running for a position there, political, best guy. None of the Christians will support him just because he doesn't have it. How sad is that? That's not the spirit of George Washington, right? So I just want to throw that in there. He was a latitudinarian. Okay, just throw that in there. Next. So we're going to go into the First Amendment. Ben here is my tech guy. He's look at the name. He's got a Valley Forge shirt on. So he is also when you went for the Boy Scouts, when you got your
Eagle Scout.
Eagle Scout. What did you do? What did you get to me? Remember?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He remembers. What was it?
I can't remember the name, but
He gave me the award to help support it.
Mentor.
Yeah,
mentor. There we go.
I know that was one of the most important times of my life, other than my marriage of my daughter, my children being born. But it was amazing. I was surprised, but he did a great job getting his Eagle Scout. But he's for 3 years. He's done public work going around the world, and now he's really he cares. I don't see a lot of young people with this spirit, but I'm going to have you read the first. But we're here for the Bill of Rights. We're doing the most fundamental right. Go ahead.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Okay, thank you. So this is our first Bill of Rights. Did you know these before? We have 5 in the first. A lot of people don't know. I mean, it's just natural. I didn't know them really. I didn't think about it myself. So it's shame on me. Shame on. We're not teaching civics today. It's really sad. And understand the fundamental foundation that we have, the freedom that we have. So next. Liberty, prosperity, and the happiness of our country will always be the object of my most fervent prayers the supreme author of good. This is Thomas Jefferson. People think that, church and state, freedom of religion, there's a wall and it should be separate. That was Jefferson's word. But you know what? Did anybody know that Jefferson was he around for the Bill of Rights? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no? No. No, he was the minister in France. It had nothing to do with the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence. In 1802, he wrote a letter to the Baptist Association in Danbury, Connecticut. And that's where this came out. Where he said something about the wall and the separation of church and state. But it was a metaphor too. So anyway, I'm not going to go into that. At this really challenging time where all these people are debating the Bill of Rights, I just want to mention one man. He's from Pennsylvania, Governor Morris. He spoke 173 times, the most of anyone, to support these Bill of Rights. Here's his words. This is documented. Religion is the solid basis of good morals. Therefore, education should teach the precepts of religion and the duties of man towards God. So he had a big influence in our early documents. Upon my arrival in the United States, okay, this is Alexis de Tocqueville. He was kind of a liberal man, but he came to America to check out our prisons. He was a minister of France, and he had other titles. But upon my arrival in the United States, the religious aspect of the country was the first thing that struck my attention. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness did I understand the secret of the genius and power. I had heard that there was one minister who could speak to 3,000 people without a microphone. Can you imagine that? That kind of conviction. So we're going to hear something on the First Amendment. This is Chris Ann Hall. She's a major leader in what ACOR is all about. And she will share something. I'll let her speak.
We are created in the image of God. And because we are created in the image of God, we've inherited certain things from God. God is the most ultimate free being in the universe. Anybody wake up this morning and tell God how to run things? No, I like to sometimes, but he still does what's best, right? Good thing, too. We don't want to live in a nation that's purely free. We can't. Do you know why? Because if we live in a nation that's purely free, that means I'm free to lie. I'm free to rob and steal. I'm free to murder. I'm free to do whatever is right in my own mind, regardless of how that affects you. Does that sound like a place you want to live in? See, that's anarchy. But John Adams said that it's liberty that must be supported at all hazards. We have a right to it, derived from our neighbor. And God, in his ultimate wisdom, knowing that we cannot handle pure freedom, gave us moral law. You see, liberty and freedom are not synonymous. Liberty is actually freedom plus morality. That morality that says, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder. Sound familiar? You know the things the ACLU won't let you have in the schoolhouse or the courthouse anymore? You see, without that shared morality that our nation was built on, we live in a nation principled in anarchy.
Switzerland, they all have guns.
Yeah, Switzerland is a good example.
But they go to the military and they know how to use one.
they're trained in the
They're
military.
trained, right? So you can see. But we're in a little different situation here, but we're going to show a video here that will explain that point. Okay? Without the pen of pain, the sword of Washington would have been wielded in vain. The Constitution preserves the advantage of being armed, which Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, where the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. James Madison. Go for it. The whole thing.
Folks, the president says he has a mandate.
The people of this nation have spoken.
That means his government can do all sorts of good things.
We can ban assault weapons.
Gun control's on the agenda, and many progressives also want to outlaw hate speech.
Hate speech is fundamentally at odds with the Constitution.
And above all, they'll spend much more of your money.
Without creating an inflation problem.
Sounds great, except those policies were just tried in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez thrilled American celebrities by embracing not just socialism, but the very ideas they'd advocated.
This is you and Hugo Chavez.
Just help me write my speech.
He is one of the most important forces we've had on this planet.
You have to be blind to actually believe that.
Andres Gilarte is one of the thousands of Venezuelans who protested socialist rule. Here he is with his friends. They risked their lives to protest.
This could be us, guys.
Deterred by security forces, participants flood the streets of Caracas.
It wasn't like a war, actually. And you're running from bullets and you're running from tear gas.
The government killed hundreds of protesters. Yet the protests continued for months because those very policies that American celebrities loved created horrible hardships.
We can't take it anymore.
Now even basic protest is often illegal because Venezuela passed a hate speech law.
The law bans Venezuelans from spreading
Never knew
violent
so,
or
right?
hateful content
Hate
through
speech
TV,
law.
radio, or social media platforms.
Yet that's exactly what half the Democrats in America now want.
Free speech is protected, hate speech is not protected.
A ban on hate speech may sound good, but the problem is,
The ruling party, they decide what hate speech is.
in America, some politicians of the ruling party also want to add 4 new justices to the Supreme Court.
A 13-member Supreme Court.
Chavez did pack his Supreme Court,
They changed it from 20 people to 32 people.
and the court has never ruled against him.
After that, no.
Venezuela also passed gun control laws, something else America's ruling party would like to do. But in Venezuela, people discovered that taking people's guns also makes it easier for the government to come to your home and
This is a
take
really
your
important
See
point.
how it actually happens in Venezuela. You're just in your shop selling shoes. And some government officer arrives and say, we're going to shut down your business. That will be completely different if that business owner had a gun.
But the government would just come in with bigger guns.
If we actually had a culture like you have here in the US, it will have been incredibly difficult.
And the restrictions on guns didn't even reduce crime. In fact, Venezuela's murder rate rose.
These laws never work. Citizens don't have guns, but the criminals have the bigger guns.
The most important lesson from Venezuela is probably the danger in the idea that governments can fund everything they want to do by simply printing more money.
The federal government, it can never run out of money. It never has to worry about finding the money in order to be able to spend.
There is no financial limit.
More spending won't create inflation, we're told. It'll do the opposite.
Driving down prices, not raising prices.
There's a new movement in America that we could just print more money and it won't cause problems, won't cause inflation, and it'll just stimulate.
Well, of course, John. That's how economy works. You just print money because money comes out from the trees.
Venezuela printed that money and spent it on programs they said would help the poor.
His supporters say that Chavez is the country's first president to genuinely care about the lower class.
But the poor were the people hurt most by the inflation that followed.
Cost of most basic goods has soared.
The oil-rich country's inflation rate at 270%.
Inflation expected to hit 700% this year.
400,000%.
1,000,000%.
Inflation's up in the United States too, and the direction looks ugly.
So if you understand anything about Marxism, it's about end justifies the means. Their goals, it doesn't matter what you do, you can just be an animal, because we're all going to be equal. It doesn't work. It never worked. There's no communist country that ever brought anything good to the people. You know, it's just it doesn't work. The ideals don't work. When you take God out, when you take family out, when you put God or you take away free will, then you lose the spirit, and things become so complicated and so oppressive. Okay, so here's a man who was a KGB agent, and this is one for the ages. And my friends worked with him when he came here, and when he was doing speaking about his experience in warning us in America. Please.
Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When the military boat crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization.